The village stores smelled like diesel, damp wool, and old anger. I'd flown in to cover a job nobody wanted, and I lasted 3 days before I started feeling eyes on my back like fingertips. Everyone knew my name without me saying it. Everyone knew where I slept. I came in on a little prop plane with my bag jammed under my knees, pretending this was just another assignment. The pilot dropped me on the ice strip, pointed at the cluster of buildings like that was the whole map, and left. No welcome, no call if you need anything. Out there, the sky decides if you're trapped, and everybody acts like that's normal. The contractor had paid for a rental cabin, 1 room, a propane heater, a sagging bed, and a generator that looked like it had been kicked down a hill. The first weird thing wasn't the darkness or the cold. It was the way the clerk at the store looked straight at me and said my full name like she'd practiced it. I hadn't introduced myself. I asked where she'd heard it. She just shrugged, rang up my food, and slid my change across the counter without breaking eye contact. I tried to laugh it off and asked her if I had a fan club. She didn't laugh back. She tipped her head toward the window like someone might be out there and said, "You should keep your door latched." Then she went right back to stacking cigarettes, like she hadn't said anything at all. I tried to do my job, and it got ugly fast. The guy in charge of the water project wouldn't meet me. His assistant met me instead, outside, hands jammed in his pockets, talking like every sentence cost him money. When I asked about budgets and timelines, he kept cutting me off with the same line. "You don't get it. People die when outsiders make noise." He said it like it was a weather report. I laughed once because my brain couldn't do anything else, and he just stared at me like I'd spit on his boots. I still drove to the project site because quitting on day 1 felt like weakness. The assistant kept sliding into my shots and muttering that I shouldn't put anyone's face in my story, like he knew what I planned before I did. Later, back at the store, 2 men by the cooler stopped talking when I walked in. One of them had that kind of calm you only see in guys who've already decided what they'll do if something goes wrong. I tried to ask a simple question: who signed off on the project, where the parts went, whether the river was safe? The owner leaned on the counter and said, "Buy what you need and go back to your cabin." Like I was a stray dog. That night, the power blinked out and didn't return. Darkness in Alaska isn't just dark. It presses against the windows like a living thing. My heater clicked off. The fridge died. My phone showed 1 stupid bar and then no service, floating there in the black like it wanted to humiliate me. I yanked the starter cord on the generator until my shoulder burned. It coughed once and quit. I swore, kicked the frame, immediately hated myself for making noise. The whole cabin felt too thin, like a cardboard prop. Then I heard boots crunch outside my rental cabin. Slow circles, no hurry. Whoever it was didn't walk up and leave like a drunk looking for the wrong door. They paced. They made a full lap, paused, made another. I held my phone up anyway, watching the useless no service float like a joke. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't call out. I just listened to that careful crunch and the silence between steps, like they were waiting for me to do something stupid. The boots stopped into my window. I heard a soft scrape, like a glove brushing the glass. Then nothing, the kind of nothing that makes your throat tighten. After a while, the crunching moved off toward the trees and faded, and I sat there in the dark with a kitchen knife in my hand, feeling pathetic and furious at the same time. When the sky finally lightened, I opened the door and saw the prints. Big tread, fresh, circling my cabin in a neat loop, then veering off toward town. Whoever did it hadn't tried to hide them. They wanted me to see. There was a cigarette, but jammed in the snow by my step, still smelling like diesel smoke, like someone had stood there long enough to finish it. My phone still had no signal. The only message I could get to load was an old voicemail notification from days ago, like the network was giving me scraps. At dawn, I drove into town because sitting still was making me crazy. I went to the clinic first, trying to find a grown-up place where people were forced to act normal. A woman in scrubs saw me in the hallway and didn't ask if I needed help. She just said, "Did you see my cousin?" Not "have you," not "do you know" scene. Like he was a thing that could show up in your headlights. Her eyes were red, but her voice stayed flat. I felt my own face do that hot flush, like my body already knew the right answer would get me hurt. I lied automatically. I said no. At the desk, the receptionist asked for my name before I opened my mouth and spelled it right on the first try. When I asked how she knew, she just said, "We were told you'd come by." I watched the woman in scrubs stare at my mouth while I said my lie, like she was weighing the shape of it. She didn't argue. She didn't thank me. She just nodded once and walked away so fast her badge swung. I stood there too long, pretending to read a poster about flu shots, and I heard staff whispering behind a door. My name again, the word river, a laugh that sounded like someone trying to swallow it. I left and walked to the airstrip to check the weatherboard because at that point getting out was the only plan I could hold on to. The board said no flights, same angry marker, same shrug in ink. I turned to head back, and that's when I saw the drag marks. Fresh grooves in the snow leading off toward the river, like a sled had been pulled without a sled. Something heavy had scraped the crust and left little red freckles where it bounced. I stared at those freckles until my stomach flipped. I told myself it was an animal. I told myself 100 things. My feet still moved. I followed just far enough to regret it. The marks dipped through the willows and the air changed, sharper, colder, with this faint rut underneath. A tarp lay snagged in the branches, stiff as plywood. The edge had been tied with baling twine, the knots neat and practiced. Not panic knots. Not, I'm improvising. The kind of knots you tie when you've got time. I didn't lift it. I didn't need to. The shape under it wasn't a moose. It was too narrow in the wrong places. I backed up and my boot hit something hard. I looked down and saw a strip of duct tape stuck to the snow, torn like it had been ripped off skin. I swear my throat tried to close. I turned around and walked back the way I came without running, because running felt like admitting someone was watching. Back in town, I went straight to the store, hands shaking so bad I dropped my wallet. I demanded to use a phone. I could hear my voice going higher, that panicky edge I hate. I tried to keep it together and failed anyway. Knocked a display of candy bars with my elbow, and nobody even twitched to help me pick them up. The owner told me there wasn't one. I told him that was bullshit. He told me, real quiet, watch your mouth. Like he cared about manners. Like that was the issue. A guy leaned on the counter and watched me shake. He didn't smile. He didn't threaten me with words. He just let his gaze say, "You're not from here, and help is a schedule, not a promise." I felt the room tip like I was the only one standing on something unstable. I tried one last time, softer because my pride wasn't worth dying for. "I just want to leave," I said. "I'm done. I'll go." The owner shrugged like weather. Plane comes when it comes. I went back to the cabin and packed with my coat on, moving too fast, knocking shit over, hating the sound of every zipper. I sat by the window and waited for daylight to drain because it felt safer to see the horizon even if I couldn't control it. The next 2 days were just me rattling around that cabin and the few buildings in town like a trapped fly. Power came back like nothing happened, but people kept watching me like I'd already done something wrong. Headlights swept my windows at night, slow, deliberate. Once I stepped out and found fresh prints pressed right up to my door, toe pointed at the latch. I went to the store one more time to ask about flights and got the same dead shrug, the same men going quiet behind me. I stopped talking after that because every word felt like it made the air tighter. A plane finally came 2 days later. I heard it first, that distant whine like a door unlocking. I hauled my bags out and didn't look toward the river. While the engine warmed, someone knocked on my cabin door once, hard, and then walked away. I didn't open it. I carried my bags out without looking toward the river. On takeoff, I saw a dark shape on the ice and told myself it was a log because the other option would have followed me home. The bush plane dropped beneath the clouds and the world turned into a flat white plate with a few black trees stuck in it like nails. The pilot kept glancing at the fuel gauge, jaw tight, acting calm the way people act right before they do something stupid. When the engine hiccuped, It sounded like a throat clearing before confession. I'd paid him cash and trusted a handshake, which already tells you how my brain was working that week. I was tired, pissed off, and in a hurry, and he could smell it on me. He kept saying we were fine, like the words were a seatbelt. I kept watching the needle sit too low and not move. I told him to turn back. He didn't even look at me, just said the gauge sticks sometimes, real casual. Then he patted the dash like the plane was a dog. The motor coughed again, and the prop sound went uneven, not loud, just wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your stomach pull up under your ribs. He shoved the throttle forward, eyes wide for half a second, and that was the first honest thing he did all day. The plane sagged under us. No drama. No screaming dive, just a steady losing of height like the sky was done carrying us. He searched for flat ground, but everything was trees and ridge and white glare. Then a lake opened up below, big and blank. He lined up on it without talking. I braced for the flip. The skis slapped, skipped, and then we were sliding, metal scraping on frozen skin. We didn't roll. We just shuddered to a stop and sat there tilted, listening to the engine wind down like it was ashamed. When I stepped out and put my weight on the surface, it complained, a low, cracking groan that traveled under my boots and kept going like the whole thing was a drum. Wind cut straight through my jacket. It didn't swirl. It just shoved. The pilot tossed me a hat like that fixed anything, then started yanking gear out fast, too fast, like speed could erase what happened. I called it a crash. He corrected me. Sharp, said it was an unplanned landing. I told him to save the vocabulary lesson for the insurance guy. He snapped back that I shouldn't have packed light if I was going to whine about cold. That one almost made me swing on him. We had a radio, but the mountains swallowed the signal. He tried again and again, changing channels, tapping the unit, swearing like the static was being disrespectful on purpose. We had a flare gun, but the sky stayed sealed shut, low clouds and flat light. Nothing to aim at. We had a small tent and the kind of cold that makes fabric feel like glass when you bend it. Setting it up turned into a fight without words. Him ripping at knots, me trying to keep the poles from snapping. Both of us pretending we weren't scared. By night, the plane looked like a dark bug hunched on the lake, and the world outside the tent felt too wide to be real. Across the ice, a whistle slid in, clean and steady, the same 3 notes in a row like someone practicing. I told myself it was wind. Then it answered itself from a different direction, farther away, perfectly timed, same spacing, like call and response. My hands went numb inside my gloves, and my brain did that stupid thing where it tries to make a pattern into a joke so you don't panic. The pilot sat up, listened, and forced out a laugh that sounded like choking. He said nothing was out there. Then he checked the zipper twice. I crawled out anyway because staying inside felt like waiting to be picked. The cold hit my lungs and made me cough hard. On the horizon, I saw a line of lights moving without bouncing. No snow machines, no road, no anything. They drifted, stopped, drifted again like they were thinking. I waved my arms before I even knew I was doing it. The lights didn't change. They didn't come closer. They just sat there, then slid sideways as if choosing another angle to watch from. I crawled back in and told him. He called a search party, but his voice didn't believe him. We argued in whispers, stupid blame stuff, fuel whether my bad attitude, because it was easier than admitting we had no control. The whistle kept coming, sometimes near, sometimes far, never messy, never random. It felt like it knew where we were without needing to look. Near dawn, I woke to quiet, the kind that makes you sit up before you know why. Shapes stood outside the tent in a loose half circle. Wolves. Not charging, not scared, just watching. Their bodies barely moved in the wind. Their heads tracked small, sounds like they were waiting for a cue. The pilot crawled out and started yelling, big tough voice, like yelling was a tool. The wolves didn't flinch. He fired a flare. It hissed and painted the snow red. For a second, the wolves' eyes didn't shine like eyes. They looked like punched out holes, flat and dark. I swear my stomach turned over. They didn't run. One took 2 slow steps closer, calm as a cashier walking to the register. He fired again, wasting it, and I grabbed his sleeve and told him to stop being a dumbass. He jerked away and called me a bitch, loud enough for the whole empty world to hear. I told him if he wanted to die out here, fine, but he wasn't taking me with him. That finally got his attention. He shut up and stared at them like he couldn't figure out what kind of animal doesn't act like an animal. The wolves peeled off as the light grew, not hurried, like they'd gotten what they came for. The whistle hit once, far away, and the wolves went toward it. That part still makes my skin crawl. We couldn't stay by the plane anymore. The pilot stopped pretending. He started packing like a thief, shoving things into bags, hands shaking now, temper sharp. I kept pointing at the sky, the clouds, the flat horizon, saying we needed to make ourselves visible. He kept snapping that visibility didn't matter if no one was listening. We walked to the trees because at least they broke the wind. My legs burned and my face felt split from cold. That's when we found the cabin. Door Ayar. No smoke, no tracks that made sense. Like it had been dropped there and forgotten. Inside, the stove was cold and there was a mug on the table with a rim of ice inside it like it had frozen mid-sip. That detail hit me harder than the wolves because it meant someone had been here and left in a hurry or didn't leave at all. The pilot swore and started rummaging, fast and greedy, ripping open cupboards, kicking at boards, grabbing whatever wasn't nailed down. I told him to slow the hell down, that we should secure the door and check the place properly. He snapped that I was scared of my own shadow, and that supplies mattered more than manners. I shoved him back from a cabinet because he was about to pull a shelf down on himself. He swung his elbow at me like he meant it, and for a second, we were just two idiots about to fight in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Then the whistle threaded through the logs outside, closer than it had any right to be, the same 3 notes, crisp like somebody was standing just beyond the wall. Both of us froze. The pilot's face went pale in a way that didn't look like cold. He stopped moving, finally. We tried the radio again. Static. Mountain still eating everything. We tried yelling anyway, like children. Nothing answered except that whistle sliding to the other side of the cabin, then the back, like it was taking inventory. The pilot started muttering, blaming me for jinxing it, blaming the plane, blaming the weather report, blaming his ex-wife, anything. I told him to shut the fuck up. He slammed a can against the wall and dented it, then stared at the dent like it had insulted him. All night we listened to small scrapes outside and that whistle coming and going, never frantic, never tired. I held my knife like it mattered. He held the flare gun like it made him a man again. Day 2 came gray and thin. My throat felt raw and my hands looked wrong, waxy, like they belonged to somebody else. Then we heard it. Real rotor chop in the distance, growing fast. A helicopter broke over the trees and the sound hit me so hard my knees went loose. The pilot bolted outside, waving both arms, screaming into the noise. I fired the last flare straight up and watched it bloom red against the low cloud. The helicopter swung toward us and dropped down, snow blasting everywhere, the cabin and trees turning into a white blur. The rescue crew moved with that hard calm professionals have. Faces hidden, gestures sharp. They grabbed me first, maybe because I was closer, maybe because I looked worse, maybe because I wasn't yelling like a lunatic. They shoved me toward the open door. I twisted back because I wasn't leaving him alone for even a second after the night we'd had. I screamed at him to get in. He was by the cabin, half-turned, looking down at the snow like he'd dropped something. He didn't look up. He didn't move. One of the crew hauled me inside, and the door started to slide shut. Through the spinning snow and rotor wash, I saw the spot where the pilot had been, and it was empty. No body, no footprints running away. Just his parka laid out flat on the snow, arms spread, like someone had carefully arranged a person-shaped absence. The lake groaned again under the rotors, and nobody on the rescue crew asked questions they didn't want answers to. My truck coughed once on the Dalton and then just quit. No dramatic bang, no smoke, just silence and a dashboard that went dark like someone snapped the sun off. I coasted on feel, eased it onto the shoulder, and the road vanished behind a curtain of moving gray. I turned the key. Nothing. I turned it again. Still nothing. I kept cranking until the battery gave up, and the ignition sound went from stubborn to pathetic to dead. That's what scared me. No struggle, no warning, just off. I sat there for a second, listening. With the engine gone, the storm got louder, like it had been waiting. Wind punched snow into every seam. The cab lost heat fast. I kicked the tire outside like that would bully Alaska into mercy. I smacked the hood. I swore into the wind, and it stole the words right out of my mouth. I popped the hood because sitting still felt like quitting. Everything looked normal and dead at the same time. No steam, no smell. Belts tight. Oses fine. The battery sat there like a rock. I yanked on the cables, scraped at the terminals with a multi-tool, checked what I could see, then slammed the hood because my fingers started to feel thick. I tried the key one more time out of spite. The dash stayed black. Back inside, I tried the CB. Static. I tried again, turning knobs too hard like anger could tune it. Static. I tried my phone anyway. No bars. I grabbed a satellite messenger and my stomach dropped. Dead. I'd watched it blink low all week and kept telling myself later. Fucking later. I had a charger, sure, but there was nowhere to plug it in. I stuck the messenger under my armpit like body heat could bully it awake. It stayed black. I told myself I had gear, I had food, I had the truck. That lie lasts right up until the truck turns into a metal box that bleeds heat. The windows hazed and iced. My breath left crystals on my jacket. I kept moving on purpose, flexing fingers, rolling shoulders, tapping my feet, because the second you stop, your brain offers you the easy option. Close your eyes. Rest. It's fine. That voice kills people. I built small, dumb defenses. I wrapped a tarp around my torso and cinched it with cords. I shoved floor mats under my coat, jammed one over my thighs, and tucked the edges into my belt. I tore the seat cover and stuffed foam in my sleeves and down my waistband until I looked padded and ridiculous. I peeled a sunshade off the dash and wedged it against the windshield to block some of that glass cold. Then I stuffed spare shirts into the door cracks where snow kept hissing in, and I jammed a sock into the vent that was breathing straight cold air on my knees. My toes started burning, sharp and hot, and I knew what that meant. The burn is the warning shot before the numbness. I rubbed my feet together hard enough to cramp. I unbuckled the boot for half a second to wiggle my toes and panicked and slammed it back down. Even that tiny exposure felt like a fuck up. I had to piss. I argued with myself like I had options. I went anyway. I stepped out, and the cold slapped my lungs shut so hard I doubled over. I tried to breathe, and it came in like needles. Wind yanked tears out my eyes. My spit hit the snow and turned thick. I pissed with my shoulders hunched and my hands shaking, then stumbled back in and slammed the door like that could keep the weather out. Time got messy after that. Minutes stretched, then vanished. I kept awake by rubbing my hands, slapping my cheeks, and punching the door panel just to make noise. I whispered insults at myself so my head wouldn't go soft. I replayed the last gas stop, the last warm room, the last chance to charge the damn messenger, and I got so angry it almost felt like heat. Almost. Then the anger would fade, and that calm would creep in again, soft and tempting, like a blanket you shouldn't trust. I try to be smart. Stay with the vehicle, don't wander, don't sweat. I also kept thinking about how every piece of advice ends with, until help arrives, like help is a scheduled delivery. On the Dalton, help shows up when it feels like it. I listened for engines and heard only wind. The cab kept cooling. My hand started doing that claw thing inside my gloves. I kept counting fingers, wiggling them in sets of 10, because if I stopped checking, I knew I'd stop caring. Then I saw taillights ahead through the blur. One blink, two, then nothing. My heart jumped hard enough to make me nauseous. I stared at that empty gray, waiting for them to come back. They didn't. I sat there frozen in more ways than one, doing that stupid mental tug of war. Stay put like you're supposed to, or move like a desperate idiot. I picture myself walking out and never finding my truck again. I picture myself staying in the cab until the cold made the choice for me. I said fuck you to the empty windshield like the weather cared about my attitude, then grabbed my flashlight and made myself move. I locked the truck out of dumb habit and stepped into the white. I counted steps so I wouldn't drift. The wind shoved me sideways. The flashlight just lit spinning snow. Every so often I stopped and looked back for my truck and couldn't see it, and that little bite of panic tasted like metal. I forced myself to keep going because turning back without finding anything felt worse than dying in place. I kicked into something hard under a drift. Plastic. A snow machine, half buried, tilted like it tried to crawl forward and gave up. My stomach dropped. I circled it and saw a guy folded over the handlebars, helmet on, visor down like he'd try to hug the machine warm. Frost filmed the inside of the helmet like he'd breathed and then stopped. His boots looked perfect. That's the sick detail that sticks. Clean, heavy, better than mine. My feet screamed inside my own boots, and my brain did the ugliest math. His would help. His didn't need blood anymore. I stared at them way too long. My hand hovered over one boot, and I could almost feel myself doing it, like survival was trying to steer. Then I pictured him later, found with bare feet, and I picture myself wearing what I'd taken. My stomach twisted hard. I didn't take them. I hate that I'm proud of that. I yanked his emergency blanket instead. The foil crackled loud in the storm. I wrapped it around myself, and it trapped a thin layer of warmth that made my skin sting. I checked around him with clumsy hands, hoping for a flare, a radio, anything that mattered. Nothing. I looked up and realized I couldn't even tell where the road was. Just wind and gray. My fingers felt like sticks at the ends of my hands. I backed away from him fast because standing there too long started to feel like joining him. The walk back was worse because the panic had a face now. I got turned around once and stopped dead, fighting the urge to run. Panic makes you sprint. Sprinting makes you sweat. Sweating kills you. I forced my legs to move slow and straight, counting steps again, promising myself I'd turn back toward the snow machine if I couldn't find my truck in the next 100. Then a dark lump appeared through the swirl, and I almost cried from relief and hate. Inside, the cold sat in the seats like it belonged there. The heaters stayed dead. The messengers stayed dead. I curled up, wrapped in tarp and foil and shame, and kept my eyes open by spite. I punched the door. I rubbed my hands until my knuckles ached. I tried to make fists and couldn't close them all the way. I kept hearing my own later in my head like it was someone else mocking me. I kept myself awake by talking to myself under my breath, mean and steady, like I was coaching a drunk friend through a fight. When my head dipped, I snapped it up and punched the door again. I could feel my fingertips fading in and out like a radio losing signal, and that scared me more than the cold. Dawn thinned the sky a little, which somehow made it worse because it meant time was passing and nobody was coming. I started imagining the dash lighting up. I started imagining the truck starting. I started imagining footsteps outside. Every time I snapped back to the truth, I felt myself slipping, like my thoughts were sliding downhill. Then a sound cut through the wind, low and heavy, not random like the storm. A rumble. I sat up so fast I got dizzy. Through the white, an orange smear showed, then headlights, steady and brutal, pushing the world aside. The plow rolled out of nothing like a moving wall. I slammed both hands on the glass and screamed until my throat scraped raw. Hands grabbed my shoulders, hauled me into heat and diesel stink, and the warmth hurt at first like my body didn't trust it. My teeth hammered. My feet throbbed. Someone shoved something warm into my hands, and I nearly dropped it because my fingers wouldn't listen. I stared at my hands because they looked wrong, waxy in spots, swollen in others. I tried to wiggle all 10 fingers like I was proving something, and that's when it landed in my gut, heavy and final. I couldn't feel 2 fingers at all.